So at Modern Athlete, we really try to hammer home the fact that we follow a system. Systems are really important because they're reproducible. So a lot of the clients and the athletes that we work with, their schedules are chaotic. They may travel, they may be out in the field, and variables get thrown their way. Having a system in the way you go about your weekly and yearly business, as from a program design standpoint, is really important. For an example, so let's say you're traveling and you normally have a back squat as like your main lower body movement. You're traveling, you may be in a hotel gym and you only have dumbbells that go up to 50 pounds. Well, having a system in place, you can still meet the intent of training. Even if you're out of the gym, your normal gym situation for a week, you can still meet the intent and meet the exercise movement category regardless of where you are. And I think that helps a lot of people just stay on track, because there's a lot of programs out there that there's a lot of variety every single week, and the user can't really figure out the sequence of events of why we're doing this on one week and then you're completely doing something else another week. With what we do from a program design standpoint at Modern Athlete, all of our clients and athletes know what the weekly structure looks like. So for the most part, we do a lower, an upper, a total on a day one, so a Monday. On day two is usually an upper, a total, a lower. And then day three is usually a total, a lower, and an upper. And those are all movement categories. And from that standpoint, once you have that, then you can just plug and play depending on your training situation. Again, if you're limited on equipment, you could still meet the training intent, even if it's not your normal gym situation. So that's why it's really important to have a system to go about program design. That's what we truly believe in, and it's the foundation of how we program. So regardless of where you are, you could still meet the desired outcome and the intent to get you by until you're back in your normal training situation. So today I'm going to go through a couple examples of some limited equipment options based on each category. So I'm going to give you some total body lift options to meet the intent for total body, as well as lower body, and as well as upper body with minimal equipment or just body weight. So I'm going to cover the total body movement category with limited equipment. Anytime I'm traveling, I try to travel with a set of bands, so I could either hook them up to a rack in a hotel gym to do banded face pulls or banded rows, things like that. In this case, I'm going to show you a banded kettlebell swing. So let's say you only have one kettlebell. You can increase the intensity of the movement because you're getting more band resistance as opposed to just the weight of the kettlebell, and it just makes it more dynamic. So total body lift category, this can easily swap out any Olympic lift while you're limited on equipment. So basically I just choke the kettlebell or choke the band around the kettlebell, take a nice wide stance, and then you can be dynamic with that, okay? So that's one example. Let's say you don't have access to a kettlebell, you can still do dumbbell swings. So even if you only have, most hotel gyms only go up to maybe 50 pounds if you're lucky. Some out there go up even heavier, great. But let's say you're limited and you only have a 45-pound dumbbell, you could easily go a dumbbell swing where you're holding onto the dumbbell and you're doing a kettlebell or dumbbell swing. So those are two movements that are a go-to of mine for total body. Total body also could be squat jumps where you're holding light dumbbells, you're doing squat jumps. You could do kneeling jumps, because all those things, you don't need a lot of equipment or any equipment, and you don't need a lot of space either. So those are some simple movements that you could plug in while you're away from your normal gym setting for a short period of time, but still meet the intent of the total body lift category, okay? So kettlebell swings are great because, again, forceful hip extension or dumbbell swings. If you have bands and you have kettlebells, you can hook the bands up to the kettlebells to make it more challenging and increase the intensity of the movement there and still keep you on track while you're away from your normal gym setting. So the next movement category I'm going to cover is going to be for lower body. So Typically at Modern Athlete, we do some sort of squat variation as our main tier 1 lower body movement. If you're away from the gym and all you have is either light kettlebells or light dumbbells, you could easily make that a goblet squat. If you're limited on weight, you could slow down the eccentric or add pauses in to increase the intensity of the movement. And again, I'm not saying that you're going to run this for 12 weeks to whatever, 6 months, but for a short period of time, you could still meet the intent of the program while you're basically playing an away game. You're not in your normal home gym setting or your home or your public gym setting. So way you can do that, in this case, I have a 45-pound dumbbell, just a goblet squat, but I'll add a tempo to it so you can slow down the eccentric and stand back up. You can even add in a pause at the bottom. So squat down, pause in the bottom, stand back up. So it gives you a little bit more versatility when you are limited on equipment. You could also do any single leg variation because most of the time our tier 1, as I mentioned, is a squat. Our tier 2, depending on the goal of the program, sometimes it's dynamic effort, so it's explosive. So that could also be a squat variation as well. And then usually our tier 3 is some sort of lunge pattern or single leg pattern. So let's cover tier 2. Let's say the program calls for 8 sets of 3 or 8 sets of 2 dynamic effort. So submaximal weight, trying to move it as fast as possible. You can still do that even if you're not in your normal gym. So the way I would do that is just intent. So I'm controlling down and then fast on the way up. Control down and fast on the way up. So you're still getting some force production, developing some power, even though it's not with a barbell. So we talk about intent a lot of times. So you can take the same weight or the same load and get 2 different outcomes based on the intent in which you move it. So if you're going really slow and methodical, you're getting a lot of time under tension. So that's great for hypertrophy, neuromuscular control, all those things. Let's say I take that same weight like I just did and try to move it as fast as possible. Now I'm getting force production, now I'm getting power development. So that's a real simple way to basically still meet the intent. If it's tier 1 and it's meant to be heavy, you can slow it down or add pauses in. And then if it's meant to be dynamic and explosive, you can take that same light weight and just try to move it as violently as possible. So that covers tier 1 and tier 2 of the lower body category. Let's say for tier 3, it's supposed to be a single leg movement. That's really easy because you could easily do body weight, lunges, rear foot elevated split squats, and then you could manipulate the way in which you hold the dumbbell. Let's say you only have one dumbbell. You could hold it in one hand and do a reverse lunge. You could even do a goblet hold reverse lunge. So it's more core activation because you have to keep your body upright. You have a lot of versatility there. But again, seeing behind the curtain a little bit, you know that tier 1 and tier 2 is most of the time some sort of squat variation. Tier 3, a lot of times is going to be unilateral. So you can still meet the intent of the program with very little equipment. And that's why it's important to have the system there. So that covers the lower body. And then I'll show you the next option. So the last movement category is going to be upper body. So we covered total body, covered lower body. Now we're getting into upper body. So again, still only using either a light dumbbell or a light kettlebell. If normally our tier 1 movement is some sort of bench press variation, you could still do a dumbbell bench press. Same way you manipulated the goblet squat by slowing down the tempo. You could do the same thing on either, I'll show you a floor press in this case, because let's say you don't have access to a flat bench, but you just have a set of dumbbells. You would just lay on the ground, press the dumbbell up, control the tempo on the way down, press the dumbbell up, control the tempo on the way down. So that would be technically like you're substituting for your max effort movement. And then for dynamic effort, you could do the same thing, either dumbbell floor press or dumbbell bench, and try to move it as fast and as violently as possible on the way up, especially if the program calls for dynamic effort and it's supposed to be submaximal. So move that weight with the same intent as if you had access to a barbell. So that's another way to manipulate it. If you have access to a pull-up bar, that's a home run, because pull-ups are always going to be king. So if the program calls for any variation of pull-ups, you're good. But let's say you don't have access to a pull-up bar, you could easily take a band and choke it around any type of piece of equipment. This is just a light band, but you could easily do like a single arm lat pull down to get that variation, to get some pulls. You can anchor a band around the rack and do a banded row. So having bands is huge, because most public or most hotel gyms probably don't have access to bands, but they're easy to pack. So I always try to travel with them, because then you can still add accessories, you can add intensity to movements by just having a simple set of bands to attach to any implement there. Another way, especially for your overhead movements or your vertical pushing, you can do any type of either half kneeling or tall kneeling military pressing. So basically, in a half kneeling position, pressing straight overhead to get that vertical push. And that just covers some upper body options for that upper body movement category. So just because you're not in your normal training environment, our system that we follow is tier system, and you can just plug and play even if you're not in your normal gym and still meet the intent of training. Because we see it all the time, like, yes, there's a time and place where you want to take some rest, maybe recovery week, whatever, go on vacation with the family. That's all well and good. But you having that system, if you still want to train while you're not at your normal gym situation, there's ways to work around it to keep you on track. So it's not like you're constantly missing a week here and a week there. Even though it's not your normal stimulus that you're getting from your normal gym, you can still meet the intent, and it makes it an easier transition back when you do get back under a barbell. So I think it's really important to kind of highlight that, because a lot of people just, most of the time, if they're not in their normal gym, they just won't train, because it's like, what's the point? But life happens, work happens, all these things. So you can still stay on track with your training program, especially if you have a system in the way you do it. And at Modern Athlete, we truly believe in our system, and our athletes know what to expect from our programming. And we just change up the intensities and the volumes and the goals of the cycles, but the overall structure stays the same. So hopefully you guys like this video. We'll be producing more content like this soon.